So this is the GLAM VII track with Science and Archives, and we have three very experienced GLAM Wiki presenters today. The first is going to be Sara Snyder? Yes, who's at the Archive of American Arts here in DC. She's been a big partner with Wikimedia DC and helped Sarah Sturck with her residence there. And she's presenting 5 reasons why archives are untapped gold mines for Wikimedians. The next will be Dominic, who, because our second presenter is double booked, so we're gonna play it by ear when he gets here, but Dominic McDevitt-Parks, and he's presenting on Wikisource in the U.S. National Archives, a case study. He's been the Wikipedian-in-residence at the National Archives. And then the third presenter is Daniel Mietchen, who's going to talk about Science Glam, and he's the Wikipedian-in-residence at Open Science. So we're going to start with Sara, and then go forward from there.
Hi, good morning. Good morning. All right.
One more administrative issue. If you have questions, we're going to save them to the end. That way we can catch everyone at once and make sure all the presentations get done. Okay, thank you.
All right, so let me know if the sound is good or bad. So today I'm going to talk about top 5 reasons archives are an untapped gold mine. I'm going to start off telling you a little bit about the Archives of American Art, where I work, talk about Wiki Project Smithsonian and how we got a Wikipedian-in-residence, and then finish up with my top 5 reasons, top 5 countdown. So if you've been doing any sightseeing in Washington, D.C. in the last few days, there's a pretty good chance you've run into some aspect of the Smithsonian Institution while you've been here. The Smithsonian is the world's largest museum and research complex. It includes 19 museums and galleries and the National Zoo, as well as 9 separate research centers and 20 branch libraries. It's a quasi-federal entity, meaning that around 70% of our funding comes from the U.S. government, while 30% comes from fundraising efforts like donations, grants, and other revenue streams. Smithsonian overall has about 6,000 employees roughly who work all over the world. It's in many ways a very decentralized organization. And on this slide, you can see a list of the research centers on the main Smithsonian website, which I am mainly showing you because I am so proud of my work as a hand model. The Archives of American Art is an archival repository which is not administratively connected to any of the Smithsonian museums. It was founded in 1954 and joined the Smithsonian Institution in 1970. The mission of the archives is collecting, preserving, and providing access to materials that document the history of the visual arts in America. To give you an example, just as an artist's paintings or sculptures might go into the collections of a museum, that artist's letters, photos, diaries, sketchbooks, postcards, files, whatever documentation they kept comes to us. In addition to artists, we also collect materials from arts organizations and businesses, such as commercial galleries or art dealers. In addition, we have a very active oral history program with hundreds of interviews, and these are a very rich and interesting source of information as well. So when I joined the archives in 2007, there was some experimental wiki editing going on. This mostly consisted of adding links to an artist's page, linking back to the record on our website for his or her archival collection. Now, we thought we were being really helpful, adding authoritative resources, but not every Wikipedian saw it that way. This slide is from the talk page of another staff member from 2008, and you can see she's accused of being a spammer and has had her edits reverted. But you can also see that another editor jumped in, talked to this person, and said, let her know your hard work has been restored, hang in there. So you can imagine this kind of experience was not uncommon for our on-staff editors. And so it made us feel a little bit tentative and experimental and sometimes a little unwelcome. Once you're accused of being a spammer, it sort of dents your confidence. But things really began to improve in 2010, and that was when Wikipedia editors from what would become the DC local chapter made contact with Smithsonian staff members, and they organized the Smithsonian Institution Wiki Project. Some of you are here today, including Alex. And these editors held an official training session for around 30 Smithsonian staff members. They instructed us on how to set up user accounts, User pages, talked about talk pages, conflict of interest. And although I had an account at the time and had been editing on and off for years, this was the first time I realized that there was a real-life community and culture behind the online encyclopedia, and that maybe they were open to institutional participation after all. So in April of 2011, Katie Filbert and Sara Sturch from the DC chapter gave a 5-minute lightning talk at a big staff event called Ignite Smithsonian. There were over 500 staff members there, and it was webcast. And they really pitched the GLAM Wiki project for the Smithsonian Institution. So right after their talk was over, I ran after Sara, who at the time was a grad student in museum studies, and started talking to her about how we could get more involved, suggesting that she might be a great candidate for a summer intern. And that is how we suddenly found ourselves with a Wikipedian-in-residence. So it's not frequent that your summer intern shows up and the first thing they say is, "I'm glad to be here. We need to write a press release." But she was right. We did. We wrote a press release and we got great press. It was the beginning of the first of many brilliant ideas from the incredibly active mind of Sara Sturch. So when we invited her to come on, our goals from the archive's point of view are really pretty modest. We wanted to run a pilot, experimental type project, partner with Wiki and see what happened. We also wanted to get some training for our on-staff Wikipedia editors who needed to know more, obviously, about the norms and the culture and what was expected of us as institutional participants. Well, we got so much more than we set out for. The activities that Sara organized were really amazing. We got that training, but we also got access to tools. For example, we were able to download or export a full list of names of creators in our collections and run a query to match them up with articles, people with that name, matching names and birth dates, so that we had this amazing list of articles that were in need of creation or improvement, including the rankings of the quality of the article. We could use this list to organize our work, prioritize our work. She also organized some brown bag info sessions for staff around the Smithsonian. They could come in and ask questions, learn more about editing, also just learn more about Wikimedia. And then we had my favorite part, which was the backstage pass and edit-a-thon. It was so fun to see all of these enthusiastic volunteers come visit our archives, work on articles, but also get tours, ask questions, interact with staff. It was just really exciting. And some of you were here today that were present at that event, and that was just fabulous. We also had a photographer and journalists from the Chronicle of Philanthropy at philanthropy.com. They produced an amazing video about the event. It was just really exciting. So outcomes after this residency was done, you can see we got a number of new articles in English Wikipedia and also a number into Spanish, French, and a couple in Catalan. Articles were expanded. We got 5 Do You Knows. We got 1 good article. And Sara also helped to coordinate a content donation to the Commons of 256 high-resolution public domain photographs that were in our collections. We also experimented a little bit with Wikisource and had an overall number of 39 e-volunteers participate, 3 staff members and 1 intern. Actually, 1 intern became a Wikipedian as her result of her being there alongside Sara and learning from her. So that was also really exciting. So in addition to all these benefits to Wikipedia, new articles, et cetera, we got a lot of benefit out of it just as an institution. We got press coverage, very positive. We got new relationships with other libraries, archives, and museums. As soon as we issued this press release, we started getting calls and emails from other folks in libraries and archives saying, "How did you get one of those Wikipedian-in-residence? I want one too. What do you do? What is this about?" And it forged new relationships for us within our professional community. We got this list of articles we continue to work from, and most importantly, we got this clear message that we are welcome as a GLAM to participate. So also we got web traffic. I'm the webmaster at the Archives of American Art, so part of my job is to look at analytics and statistics. And you can see since 2009 the steady increase in the importance of Wikipedia as a referrer to our site. So I also was amazed to discover that Since 2010, Wikimedia sites have driven double the amount of page views to the archive's website when compared to all our other social media sites combined. So if we're talking about return on investment, the amount of time we spend Facebook and tweeting is important, but we get double the traffic from our efforts on Wikipedia and Wikimedia. So now that I've talked a little bit about the residency, I want to talk a little bit about archives for a minute, just because we've all probably visited museums and libraries many times in our lives, but not many of us go to archives, and they're a special kind of place for a special kind of research. So I just want to clarify a little bit what archives are and what they do for those of us who are not as familiar. Archives are found everywhere. You can find them in universities, within libraries, the special collections department, or manuscripts. Historical societies, governments, nonprofits, even private companies all have archives. They're all around us. And many of them have pretty open access policies that anybody who's researching something can sign in and see what they have. Archives have a mission both to preserve, save the old stuff, and also provide access to researchers. And sometimes that's a little bit in tension, but they have to find a balance between keeping the old stuff safe and letting people see it. Materials in archives are things that accumulated in the course of everyday business. It's not something that was created intentionally for posterity to study, usually. It's just the evidence of everyday activity that accumulated over time by a person or an organization in their file drawers or on their computer. Archives are typically described on the aggregate. That means we describe things looking at the box in the folder, and we don't necessarily go in and catalog every single item or piece of paper. I mean, the Archives of American Art, we have roughly 16 million items. You could imagine if we lovingly crafted a description for every single letter in the repository, we would all retire before we got through one collection. So they tend to limit description to boxes of stuff or folders of stuff or other sort of aggregate larger levels of stuff. And just for reference, if you are planning to do any research in archives or you want to work with archives, often they can be really complicated and a little bit different from one repository to another, so it's always a good idea to talk to the friendly staff who are really good at helping you use their collections. So now I'm going to get to my top 5 reasons why archives are an untapped goldmine for Wikipedians and Wikimedians. So reason number 5, the stuff. Every archive is unique, and within each archive, every collection is unique. You can find things in an archive that you won't see anywhere else, that frequently don't exist anywhere else. You can learn about a person's biography, but you also might find intimate family photographs, their handwriting, their signature. You can read their diary. You may be able to read the transcript of an oral history interview with the person or see video or hear a recording of their voice as they talk about their lives. This is the raw stuff of history, and it can be transportingly powerful. I would absolutely encourage you to come and visit archives in person, but increasingly you might not have to. Most repositories have a pretty good web presence, and descriptions of their collections are freely available online often. And many have often already digitized kind of their greatest hits documents, like rare letters or photographs. At the Archives of American Art, we've actually started digitizing entire collections, so you can frequently go through the entire box and folder online without ever having to come in person. So reason number 4, lots of material is ready and free and available. So a lot of times, contents of archives are old, so copyright has expired. Government records are in the public domain. These are amazing opportunities to take content and give it to the Commons or Wikisource. One caveat about copyright, there tends to be a pretty good expertise on copyright on archive staff, but archives also usually have a small staff and lots to do. So, because we're describing our collections sometimes at the box or folder level, we may not have a clear understanding of what's happening with copyright of every single letter. So it's important to work closely with the archives to help determine if things are appropriate to put on public domain. But there are often going to be examples of low-hanging fruit, such as the older stuff of the government records that might just be ready to go on to Commons right away. So reason number 3, don't know if you guys have seen the show on PBS, The History Detectives, where they present sort of a history mystery and you kind of watch them go through the process of discovering the truth behind this question using these primary source documents that are sometimes found in archives. And it's exciting stuff. So if you want to feel like you are a detective yourself, it's really cool to open a box of old stuff that maybe no one else has seen in decades, or to dabble in really awesome retro technologies. Microfilm, anyone? And just smelling old paper. So again, I encourage you to work with the archives, to whichever archives you are using, work with their staff, especially the reference staff, talk to them about the kinds of materials that they have and how you can get into it. So number 2, archival collection descriptions. We call these by many different names. Sometimes they call them guides, sometimes descriptions, inventories, finding aids. But these tend to be well-researched, authoritative, really excellent encyclopedic type articles about the person or entity that created a collection. They're online. That means they're published. Cite them. They're great, reliable sources of information. Number 1, the reason you should look to archives for partnering and GLAM Wiki projects is because of archivists. Now, unlike curators, they're less interested in interpretation or shaping an educational experience. They're like librarians, and they see their role as sharing information and facilitating, but not necessarily shaping, the research of others. So frequently they have academic training in history or in library and information science. They're an educated group of folks. They do really care about sharing information and helping people. You don't toil away by yourself with boxes of old paper for months on end because you're in it for the money or the glory. That way they're like Wikipedians. They're doing it because they really care. So you'll often find some tech-savvy folks working in archives with database and XML experience. You'll definitely find people who are very familiar with copyright issues. And you may find a secret Wikipedian already embedded on staff. So the bottom line is archivists want to work with you. They really do. So in a month from now, I'm going to be on a panel, actually with Dominic, and we're going to be attending the Society of American Archivists annual meeting in August, and we're going to stand up in front of all of these professional archivists and talk about why, what's the title? 80,000 volunteers can't be wrong. The case for greater collaboration with Wikipedia. So we're going to be making the case to that group. And so what I would like to know from you, thanks, we're going to be singing your praises, encouraging these folks to use GLAM resources, to tell them to hook up with local chapters, to try and establish residencies. But I'd also like to know from you guys what else you want us to tell them. So if you want to get in contact, you can see our project on Wikipedia. GLAM SI is the Smithsonian Institution project. GLAM AAA is the Archives of American Art Wiki project. My username is up there, my email, and then this is the Archives Twitter account if you want to tweet us. So I hope you'll get in contact if you have thoughts or ideas for our talk a month from now, and thank you for your time.
Okay. So Dominic is gonna wait, and we're gonna bring Daniel Mietchen.
Doesn't matter that much.
Okay, and he's been at Open Science, and he's how long has your Open Science activities been?
I'm an open science scientist for 5 years or so for part of the science that I do, but I'm Wikimedian-in-residence on open science since a year.
So he's been very active and helpful, just like Sara and Dominic. So as he hooks up, it's almost there.
While I'm setting this up, I would like to say that I came here in part because I wanted to have your input. There is this initiative, the GLAM Wiki initiative, that you've heard about in all these different presentations before in this stream here, and maybe in other presentations as well. Oh my goodness, now I have to set this up while I'm talking. And let's just go to the Science GLAM thing.
No, this is Skype.
This is Skype. I just gave my talk via Skype. So what I wanted to have here is feedback. So far the GLAM has focused on the cultural sector, kind of implicitly excluding what's happening here. I have also the, well, I should have used any computer that was connected here. I cannot really talk while I'm connecting the stuff here. So if someone could help me with that. I just need the wiki page that we had. These are my notes from the last talk. So the cultural sector so far has been, has had a lot of interaction with Wikipedia, but there was no science museum, there was no natural history museum involved yet. And the question I would like to pose to you is actually whether there is a principal reason why we should treat those institutions differently, if yes or no, how should we react to that?
Do you have another browser like Firefox or something?
I do. Kind of Google seems to be...
Chrome seems to be crashed.
Yeah, okay, well, we can take any browser basically. And so the reason why there might be differences is, for instance, all the traditional cultural institutions, they have collections of cultural items which are more or less unique. Of course, you may have uniforms of people who served in the Vietnam War, and those uniforms, they have been produced by the thousands, but the thing that they have in a museum, it is then attributable to one specific soldier that wore it at a specific time. Whereas in natural history museums, you often have things like minerals, for instance, or you have examples of a bug of a certain species. And you may have this in hundreds of museums around the world. So there is an ice bear in many natural history museums. There is a certain birds, the typical kind of stuff. And the question would be whether we as Wikipedia could make use of this kind of reservoir of shared knowledge amongst all those natural history museums in order to, for instance, improve our articles on, let's say, those minerals or those birds, or whether we could help the different institutions to display their articles in a more interactive manner or in languages that they don't normally cover in their institution, things like that. And the tools that we have at hand for that are things like the QR codes that you've heard about, I guess, enough during the sessions here. Okay, now we're in. I was actually not in the network. Okay. Yeah, Science GLAM. Just Google it. Let's see what happens. Here we go. That's a good thing about having the talks on Wikipedia. It's always the first hit. An example that I'm showing here on the top right is an exhibit at the National Museum of Computing, and they're exhibiting a Harwell computer. I don't know really what a Harwell computer is, but you can click on it. That's the nice thing about stuff on Wikipedia. And we actually have articles about many, many things in museums already, including science and technology museums. And we have articles about the species that are that have been described and for which the type specimen is available in the collection of that particular museum. We have the original manuscript that described that species in certain museums or in botanical gardens and so on. By the way, I should probably say the definition of Science GLAM goes beyond galleries, libraries, archives, and museums. It includes zoos, botanical gardens, and also field stations. Basically, whoever does something scientific and does it for the common good, not for profit, basically. And so a number of projects have been launched in the GLAM wiki arena. None of them really with a science focus, but some had some aspect of science to it. So for instance, the Taylor Museum in the Netherlands ran an article writing challenge. And it has a number of exhibits on scientific materials. So this could be considered one of the science museums that already collaborate with Wikipedia in some sort. Then we had long nights of the museums or long nights of the sciences. In Germany and in a few other countries, there is a tradition of having kind of days of open doors, but they happen to be during the night, so they are called long nights of the sciences, long nights of the museums, long night of music, and so on. And we have run a few demos of this scheme this year. So there was the long nights of museums it was the long nights of the sciences in Berlin, where Wikimedia had a stand in the Natural History Museum, actually in the mineral cabinet, in the mineral collection. And we have equipped that hall with a number of QR codes to the minerals that are on display, Curipedia codes. And so the people who came there with their mobile phones could see the minerals, the original ones, and then could go to read or check or whatever the Wikipedia articles in their language. We had another collaboration during the long nights of the sciences in Leipzig, last month, and there we gave workshops for people who had never edited Wikipedia. It was also, it was rather old people actually, not the typical stereotypical Wikipedian that many people have in their head, but they came there open-minded and said, "Oh, I'm really interested. Dear young man, please show me the internet," was one of them told me. And then after I had shown her the internet and Wikipedia, she asked, but that Assange guy, and isn't he in prison? Kind of implying that shouldn't our website be shut down? Okay, I explained her that this is a different thing. So it is a lot of direct interaction with the public, especially with people who don't normally frequent Wikipedia. So since Wikipedia, at least the English one and the larger ones, have a decline in editors, but still many topics, including things like fashion and dresses, not covered too well, but also things like the interests of the people that are much older than most of the editors. They are not very well covered. The pop stars that they had when they were young. There may well be an article about them, but it's probably much shorter than the pop stars that currently reign the media. And in terms of science, there are a lot of retired professors who have themselves described certain species or who have contributed otherwise to certain scientific discovery or who have taught a lot. So they may have a lot of teaching materials that could, in principle, be used. So at the Smithsonian Natural History Museum, I was there yesterday morning, and they had an action or an initiative where they were kind of going around everyone in the department, including the retired professors, and kind of forcing them to pull out of their drawers whatever they have in terms of illustration of bugs. And this has turned into an amazing collection of images that they are not yet prepared to upload to Wikimedia Commons, but this is mainly for technical reasons because all of the stuff that they produce is in the public domain anyway. So we don't have the problems that we have with many of the GLAM institutions that we first have to start negotiating about licensing. But for them, the collection is not entirely digitized yet. And so the question is whether we can assist with that and what we can do with the part that is already digitized. But this kind of information is available in many science GLAMs, not just in museums. There's also science libraries, there's science archives. I'm not so sure about science galleries, but they may exist somewhere. They certainly exist online in places like Springer Images. The scientific publisher Springer has a database of images. Most of them are closed access. Some of them are actually taken from Wikipedia and still labeled as closed access. And there are other image databases out there. But there may be others that have images in an analog fashion. I'm not aware of them, but I think they exist somewhere. There's also sound archives. I've actually tried, because bioacoustics is part of the research that I do, and I know some people who run sound archives. I've tried to get them to upload, or at least to give us sounds on a scale. And they are in institutions that do not have their stuff in the public domain. They really stick to their copyright and don't want to give it away that easily. So there's a lot of materials that we could use because all the articles about biological species, they tend to have an image, but almost none of them has a sound example of that species. Would really be great. And so the question that I'm posing to you while I'm now hopefully closing this thing here is whether there is anything systematic that we can do how we can inspire those that have not really started collaborating with Wikipedia, how we can help those who have already started. For instance, here the penultimate image is an image from the zoo in Sofia, where they are using QR codes to inform visitors, QRpedia codes to be precise, to inform visitors about the species that are on display. And they're doing this for the whole zoo, and they're coordinating this with the Natural History Museum in Sofia. And on the bottom of the page, we have the Museo de la Plata, somewhere in Argentina, where they also show QRpedia codes at the bottom. We can actually, if you have your mobile phone with you, we can try to do this, whether you can read it from that screen, because it should work. I've seen it before. I've done it before. But yeah, maybe it's not the best. We have others for which it actually really works. But the thing is, you have here the whole description, and the small QR code, it doesn't really change that much. It's not taking over the whole description, but it really adds something to it. And yeah, these are the things that.
May you try it?
Yeah, try.
Want me to move your cursor then?
I move the cursor away.
I don't think it's going to do it.
Okay, well then we should do it with others. I actually tried it from this computer and it worked. Okay, but this is not the problem. If we are close to that thing in Argentina, it will work, and we can even get the statistics. Well, there were talks about QRpedia. I won't explain that in too much detail, but the normal. There will be one. Okay. So the normal QR code points to basically any string of text, more or less. And this string of text could be a URL. It could be a URL of a Wikipedia page, but it could also be a URL of something that points to Wikipedia pages. And that's what QRpedia does. It checks whether an article exists on the topic that you're clicking about. Here, the topic here is encoded in that QR code. But it checks whether an article exists in the language of your phone, and then points you to that article if it exists, and if not, it goes to a default page. So, and for details, I refer you to the experts. So this is basically what I wanted to say, and now I'm hoping for some discussion.
So since he has to leave and questions, if it's all right with other panelists, we'll open it up for questions for about 15 minutes. And so if anyone has a question, raise your hand. I'll bring you the mic and introduce yourself and then ask your question. Thank you.
Thank you. Yeah, the talk on QRpedia is at 2:30 this afternoon in 309. We did something in Monmouth that I think would be great for science articles and science institutions, where we got the director of the museums in Monmouth to do a short video that we put on the Wikipedia article for the museum. For scientists, I think a lot of them want to give out their information, and to do a short video on their subject would be, I think, an amazing, just a short explanation of their subject would be an amazing thing to put on Wikipedia articles.
Okay, yeah, to that I would like to comment that on Wikipedia we have a project called Oral Citation, which is basically meant for cultures that don't have any written record, or to support statements for which there is no written evidence. Like, for instance, any games that people play in rural areas of India where nobody has access to any paper or electricity. And so the Wikipedia article about that game could still exist, and it could cite sources that are actually videos of people who have played that game, and the video can be embedded. There are a few examples for this on the English Wikipedia. In terms of other videos, I actually want to show you my talk page, because someone from Wikimedia Sweden posted on it a video that was taken in collaboration with the Nobel Museum in Stockholm, Science GLAM. And what they did was, during the ceremony, or the days before or after, I don't know exactly, they were interviewing the laureates that were there in Stockholm. And amongst the interviews, amongst the interviews, there were several questions about Wikipedia. There's also the habit of those laureates that they bring with them when they come to Stockholm. They don't just get something, but they also bring something to Stockholm. And these are personal items that somehow Iconify or symbolize the thing for which they got the Nobel Prize. So, for instance, the guy who got the Nobel Prize for graphene basically brought a pencil, a graphene pencil, and some sort of well, it was not paper. It was some sticky paper that he had used first to demonstrate that you can kind of make certain things with it. I don't know the details. And here is the video, but it doesn't really display well. So I'll switch it off. You just know it's on my talk page. It came in, yeah, basically yesterday. And I had planned to open my talk with this, but since I wasn't set up, I just left it. It's really cool to hear the Nobel Prize winners really express their appreciation of Wikipedia. I was at the Nobel laureate meeting in 2005 when they had it across all disciplines, and I was talking to many of them and asking them, should I, as a young scientist, invest my time in things like Wikipedia? Most of them said, no, you shouldn't. Concentrate on papers. But some said, well, if you're really into doing things in a bit different way, you really stand good chances if you do it the right way, if you really invest a lot of energy. That's kind of the way I chose in the end. Yeah, so this was kind of a reaction to your comment. Further input?
Hi. 2 questions, actually. Pardon? Well, I'm from the German Wikipedia. My name is Brunswick. That's a giveaway of my hometown, so I get 2 questions. First of all, how do you generate the QR code? And second, could I invite you to my hometown, because I'm just working on several GLAM projects. That would be very interesting for me to have a support from you, well, to crush the ice, so to speak, to break the ice.
Okay, should I give a demo of the QR codes right now, or should it defer to you?
If you'd like to come to the session this afternoon, it is a workshop to show you exactly how you do it and all the issues surrounding how you display them.
So I defer you to the workshop, but if you don't have a time to attend it, you can come to me. I can show it later on, after my next talk. But yeah, what's the name of your town? Bottrop? Braunschweig. Okay. Oh yeah, that's why you're named Brunswick. Yeah, I was there a few weeks ago, so there's no problem coming over and talking details.
Thanks. I'm Jim, a local Wikipedian. Comment question: my impression is the archivists are kind of ahead of the curve, and the museum professionals are perhaps lagging science museum as to why there's less, Wikipedians in residence at science museums. But is that your impression, or?
Well, there's certainly no Wikipedian-in-residence in science museums at the moment. So yes, you're right in saying there's less. But I think at the moment we're really at the starting phase. So this could be considered just a noise effect. We have to start somewhere. We start where there is interest, where there's mutual interest between the Wikimedians and the GLAM community. And this just happened to be those that we have at the moment. At the moment, we have on the order of 20 to 30 Wikimedians-in-residence scattered around the world, mostly in museums, actually, not in archives, but none of them in any sciencey, focus or so. Yeah, that's what I would like to say.
Max Klein, Wikipedian-in-residence for OCLC. So I want to answer your question about what people can do, whether they should be whether science museums should be under the same auspices as the regular GLAM. The question that really comes up a lot with the libraries is the distinction between those that have unique holdings and those that have just basically public holdings that don't have anything special or unique to contribute. So do you see the same distinction existing in science museums, and how much of a barrier do you think that could be? Because it's my impression that science museums tend to have less unique holdings, but I'd like you to correct me if I'm wrong on that.
Well, I certainly can't speak for all science museums. I know most natural history museums in Europe, but I think the distinction applies there as well, at least largely. And so it could make sense to coordinate our strategy with having this in mind. And so for those things that concern unique collections, basically they are not much different from the traditional cultural institutions. And then probably we should just do the normal GLAM approach. And then the question still is in the room whether we should really make use of the potential of them being many natural history museums exhibiting more or less the same stuff. Because they could, if a museum somewhere has made a nice visualization concerning something, that you could have a version of this, maybe in a different language, in another natural history museum. And so far, they don't really collaborate that much. They go to their own conferences and so on, and exchange kind of strategies, approaches to how to engage with the audiences, but they don't really exchange materials unless they kind of give it away on a loan basis like the traditional cultural institutes do.
Yeah, on a positive note, I just want to say that I'm at the Natural History Museum. My name is Katja Scholz, and we're talking about getting a Wikimedian-in-residence pretty soon at the Natural History Museum here to collaborate with the Encyclopedia of Life and the Biodiversity Heritage Library. So we might very soon, maybe next year, have somebody working with us here and working out all of these details. There are problems getting stuff out into non-commercial use, even though all of the work by our staff is in the public domain. A lot of the holdings in the Smithsonian are actually done by contractors and collaborators. And the problem is not so much in getting the stuff out, but figuring out which is which, because they never had to do that in the past. And so that's one of the big barriers. And our curators are very scared in releasing things that they don't have the rights to. We're talking mostly about images and other media, sounds, videos, things like that we collect and that we could give out. And also having our curators and our collection managers participate in editing things like Wikipedia and providing information to Wikipedians.
You could figure out what the Smithsonian created images are, right?
It's just often in our data management systems, we don't discriminate because we never had to in the past. And now that we want to release this stuff to the public, we have to figure out which is which.
Okay, maybe we can talk about this later on.
Just personal experience. That's one of the big problems we had initially with the Smithsonian talks, is that no one was sure what they had or who could participate. So that's been an issue that the community around here has slowly been working at. I saw a question up here.
I see a hand back there, the guy in the black shirt. So. I wonder if you guys are watching, and I think this is something that pertains to everybody in the GLAM world, watching the Wikidata project and looking for ways to offer input and to be a part of structuring the way that project works, because it seems like a lot of what both of the presenters so far have talked about is the kind of material that wants to populate potentially lots of different entries in a kind of authoritative and manageable way. I mean, I think about arboreta and botanical collections that you go and look at an entry on the Dawn Redwood or something like that, and it would be wonderful to know where they live, where examples are available near you. So where do you see Wikidata fitting into how the collections of science GLAMs in particular, perhaps, populate Wikimedia?
Well, I think in the long run, speaking in a 2 to 5 year framework, that's certainly included. At the moment, the core issue with Wikidata is getting it off the ground, handling the interlanguage links, and then starting with the simple info boxes. Some of the taxo boxes are not amongst the simple ones. And so we're not on top of the list, but it is in the picture. And once such kind of information is available, we still have the decision of the then Wikidata community, whether information should be pulled in from outside or curated manually by themselves. We don't know how this is going to be handled because that community doesn't exist yet.
Hello, I have a few comments. I'm a volunteer in a museum of natural history in Toulouse. I take pictures out there. In fact, we have a partnership. And what is amazing is that not only the collections are, the permanent collections are interesting, it's in fact all the collections that are hidden in the museum that are interesting. For example, there are 2.5 billion items that are not exhibited in the museum, and this is what we are taking in pictures. Let me answer to one question. Someone said museums maybe do not have a unique item. They do, just they don't know. For example, we take pictures of a really crappy fish, but in fact it was the only pictures we have on commons, and that they don't know. Sometimes they have a lot of items that are just in the dust and that are really, really unique, and they just don't know because they have so much of them, and that's just my comment.
Okay, I agree with that, and I think Wikipedia could really play a role, and also Wikimedia Commons, in kind of opening the collections to the public, because for basically any kind of museum, it's always true that the largest part of the collection is not visible to the public, and the curators of these collections have a hard time to select because they have such a lot of stuff. And they could, for instance, if let's say a large proportion of their collection would be available on Wikimedia Commons, they could, for instance, use usage statistics on Wikimedia Commons as a basis to decide what goes into the next exhibition. Kind of, we take the most popular items and the least popular items, and some of in between. So that would be an additional kind of chain or dimension of criteria that they can use in deciding what goes into the next exhibition. Also exhibitions. There are many permanent exhibitions that change very slowly over the years, and there are certain special exhibitions that stay there for half a year or something like this. And then normally they're just gone. And there's a lot of effort that goes into that could in principle be preserved by having the exposition be continuing online somewhere. It doesn't have to be Wikipedia, but could be in principle.
We have time for one more question. So, that's Solomon.
Your initial question about whether or not what type of collaboration or how to decide, I think the fact that actually it's a two-way street. They get something from us as much as we give something to them is a really good reason to continue going into them, even if they may not have things that we necessarily see as unique. I think, as we were pointing out, we can go in there and help their exhibits be better. They can link to things we already have. Encyclopedia articles about the topic that maybe go more in depth than what they're able to do at their visual display there and that type of thing. So I think there's a lot of potential that we shouldn't to be real thoughtful about that, especially if there is interest from people in going in there, not discouraging it necessarily.
Okay, yeah, thank you. And then please excuse me for leaving now. I really want your input, so if you have some more comments or so, leave them on my talk page or leave them with my colleagues. They will get in contact with me. Thank you.
Thank you. It's a very good discussion, and our next person is Dominic McDevitt-Parks. He's the Wikipedian-in-residence at the National Archive here in Washington, D.C. It's the repository for many of the government documents that are of record in the United States. And so it's a collection, and he'll probably tell you a little bit more about this. But they collect from everything from the military all the way through local local branches of the U.S. government. So
this is fine. Actually, Sarah's talk was a pretty good introduction to mine, and yesterday we heard from the National Archives Chief Digital Access Strategist, and you'll hear later today from David Ferriero, the Archivist of the United States. So instead of taking a broader approach, I want to talk about a specific activity. And I really want to talk about Wikisource for the Wikipedians also as kind of an underutilized project. So I just want to kind of shed light on it because most Wikipedians will also be unfamiliar, and then also because I think it has a lot of potential for cultural institutions. So obviously the things that apply to Wikipedia also apply to Wikisource. It's a nonprofit with no editorial staff. And so I like to say that, instead of just talking about Wikipedia, we should be talking more about Wikimedia as a family of projects. So you're all familiar with Wikipedia, and this one is a Wikisource. So I'm going to be talking about Wikisource from a GLAM perspective, and this is the slide that I usually show when I'm talking about GLAM. And these are the three main bullet points that I have about why institutions should be working with Wikipedia. And I say Wikipedia as an ally, kind of as I just addressed, it's a nonprofit. Unlike other social media channels, Wikipedia is, interested in spreading knowledge. That's their purpose. It's a volunteer workforce. You all know that. And when I say it's the ultimate platform, what I mean is, that's where everybody on the web is going. So if we apply that to Wikisource, it basically the same things apply. Obviously, Wikisource is an ally, just like Wikipedia. I'd added a question mark to whether Wikisource is a volunteer workforce, because in reality, there's not the same same numbers of editors there. Although I have to say, from my experience, the core of editors on the English Wikisource have contributed probably as much to National Archives, or as much time to National Archives projects as Wikipedians have, because they were dedicated and they just dove into it, and 5 dedicated people could produce a whole lot of work. I think also Wikisource is the ultimate platform, but platform in a different sense, because there are other places where transcriptions take place on the web. People always make comparisons to Project Gutenberg or even something like Internet Archive. But Wikisource, oh, sorry. I ruined the surprise. And I'm the Wikipedian-in-residence at the National Archives. Yesterday, Pam at the panel, my boss, made me stand up and show that I had this temporary tattoo. So there we go. So as I was saying, Wikisource is the ultimate platform in the sense that it's, unlike some of the other projects, it's a wiki. It's collaborative. And projects like Gutenberg or Old Weather crowdsource transcriptions, but in a totally different way. And you don't have the wiki experience where every single page that's transcribed could be transcribed by a totally different person. Someone you can just, land on that page, type something into a box, somebody else will validate it. So what is Wikisource exactly? A collaborative platform for transcription, proofreading, translation, sometimes, and arrangement of textual documents. And I think the important thing here is Wikisource, Wikipedia bills itself as the free encyclopedia, but Wikisource is the free library. So if you think about that, Wikisource is, I think, the most ambitious Wikimedia project. The encyclopedia is, one book or many volumes of a book in the library. But Wikisource is everything in the library. It seeks to encompass all of written literature ever, and that's a big job. And that's kind of what cultural institutions are for. That's what archives do. So in terms of, for a GLAM, what is Wikisource? I think for cultural institutions, Wikisource is actually an easy sell. And it kind of goes back to what Sara said about archivists are wary of interpretation. And so while archives want to work with Wikipedia because that's where they can get their material out to the people, I think sometimes they're a little unsure of how they can do that while still maintaining, archival practices, because they don't see themselves as creating, secondary or tertiary literature about their documents. They'd rather just make them available. But one of the best ways to make documents available is to transcribe them and make them searchable and much more usable. That's what Wikisource does. It's all about the documents. And unlike most places where most types of transcription, Wikisource seeks to be true to the original formatting. So when it's done right, it's not just typing bare text into text boxes. And so what that means, there's all kinds of formatting templates and things. It sometimes can get a little complicated, but what that means is Wikisource is actually a good platform for displaying transcriptions on the web. And you'll see later, when a document is completed, when it is moved into the main namespace, it actually looks like the original document, because you can do all sorts of different formatting things with the templates, except that it's all plain text and searchable. And I kind of talked about it already, that it's why, and I don't mean it in a bad way, but it's a different thing from Project Gutenberg and Internet Archive. So to start off with, I kind of like this this story of Mark Codeney was one of the original early adopters of Tumblr. He was the editor of the Newsweek Tumblr. And Newsweek, like a lot of traditional print media, was going downhill, but their Tumblr became really popular because of his personality. So eventually he left to work for Tumblr, and in his final post, he kind of gave some advice, and this is kind of the way I think about how the National Archives or any cultural institution should be working with online communities. And I'll just read the part that I bolded, but he says, the most important thing for any publisher is to first be a full participating member of the community, and that the main focus should be on meeting the needs of that community. And that's kind of the beautiful thing about working with the Wikimedia projects, is that there's a real alignment of interests rather than a conflict of interest when everybody's still fulfilling their missions. So as an example, the National Archives open government plan for 2012-2014 was released quite recently, and I was pleased by the way that the Wikimedia projects were mentioned in the open government plan, and not just mentioned, but kind of interwoven throughout. And so you can really see that we're going beyond just being an experiment. So this is the opening message from the Archivist of the United States on the first page, and I just highlighted the part about where he mentions Wikipedia there. And to me, I think the most exciting part is that last sentence, where he says, "Our work with Wikipedia is changing the way we think about our work." This is kind of the archival work of the future. And later on, in the plan, Wikisource is specifically addressed, and so it mentions the Citizen Archivist dashboard, which I'll talk about later. And actually, let me just. So right now, I'm going to get into kind of some more practical things. And I want to show you how transcription takes place on Wikisource, and specifically some of the processes that we developed for the National Archives project, how the different ways that people can transcribe National Archives material. So for us, the first thing was we had to upload stuff. So this is just 10 documents from the feed of our U.S. National Archives upload bot. You can't really read it, but it's just to show you, we uploaded almost 100,000 files, most of them not textual, but for all the textual documents, once they've been uploaded, we developed, this is what a typical page looks like on Wikimedia Commons, where the files are being uploaded. But you'll see we developed this little transcribe this document button. And so the idea here is there may not be a ton of people on Wikisource, but if we can develop different entry points for people that's not necessarily native Wikisourcers, then we can bring people in, and maybe they see a cool document, they can transcribe that one page, and that's it. So this button, if you click it, it'll take you to, now you're at Wikisource, and this is the transcription box. Sorry, this is the transcription box on the left, side by side with the document itself. And at the top, we developed a lot of custom instructions. So it actually takes you through the, I mean, this is not, the whole universe of help pages for Wikisource, but the idea is somebody should be able to land on this page, never having seen Wikisource before, and be able to transcribe a page. So it's as simple as you can create an account if you want, all the way down to how do you proofread a page, but just in a few short sentences. So that's one way. This is a close-up of some of the descriptions. So this is one way, and at the top there's a link that goes to the actual wiki project for the National Archives that lives on Wikisource. Of course, if you are a Wikisource editor, this is what you would see. This was back in, I forget which month, one of the featured texts came on Wikisource came from the National Archives. So we got this whole blurb. It's on the left. This is a really cool document from the National Archives. And Wikisource is also the collaboration, the ongoing collaboration on the English Wikisource, the National Archives projects. So if you were on Wikisource and you clicked through to see the National Archives Wiki project, this is what you would see. This is like a wiki project on Wikipedia. This is the project hub. This is where the editors collaborate. And so you can see where we've uploaded, when we've uploaded works, we kind of created a workflow. You can see all the different steps in transcribing a document, everywhere from uploading the TIFF master file to converting it so it can be displayed on Wikisource, creating an index page, which is where the bibliographic data lives, proofreading, validating, and everything. So that's kind of in progress. This is what a page looks like as it's being proofread. So even if you upload a multi-page document in PDF or Deja Vu file format, you get a side-by-side. Each page is side-by-side with what you're transcribing. You can zoom in here. So it is a cool platform, I think. And the little buttons at the bottom are how you mark where it is along in the process. This is what an index page looks like for a long document. And what I mean by marking the page status, what you'll see here is there are lots of different colors here. So each page, once it's transcribed, the first transcription, the first pass is, we call it, is proofread, so it's yellow. Once a second independent editor has gone through and looked at the transcription and validated it, then it becomes green. Red is not started yet. So this is what an in-progress document could look like. This is for Wikisource. This is the final product. This is a legal document, and you can actually see, the formatting. There's formatting that's maintained. So this is what I say. This is what I mean when I say it actually is a pretty good platform for displaying things for the web. And this is all plain text. For the National Archives, our final product is now completed texts like that are from the National Archives are linked in our catalog. So any researcher in the National Archives online catalog will now see a link to Wikisource. The next step. Obviously, that means that text is still not searchable yet through the online catalog, but that's the next step. So the third way, the third path to transcribing a document on Wikisource is coming from the National Archives itself. So recently, the National Archives launched its Citizen Archivist dashboard, where there's a whole host of crowdsourcing projects, and one of which is transcribing documents on Wikisource. So if you're at archives.gov and you see this project, you could end up at this page where it'll direct you to transcribe documents. You might see an interesting document here in the gallery and click on it, and you'll see this familiar page with the description or the instructions at the top, and you can just dive right into transcribing. So that's the dashboard. Our results, we have 71 documents that have been fully transcribed, validated, and or will be linked when the next catalog is next updated. That represents 400 pages that have been transcribed, and 120 of them which have been validated by another independent editor.
What fraction is that?
Of the National Archives, or what we've... Yeah. Yeah.
More importantly, how does it scale?
Well, I mean, that's obviously the problem is, the problem right now is just a manpower problem. So that's why I'm here, talking to you all about it. So yeah, I mean, this is my last slide. I'm just, in the future, these are, the things that I think we need to work on. From the institution's point of view, integrating the volunteer program that all institutions already have into something like Wikisource is way simpler, I think, than telling people to write encyclopedia articles. You can set them up, and you're literally transcribing. Institutions already have volunteers doing a transcription. And Wikisource is an existing platform to do it in a nice way, and in a way that the public can collaborate with you on it. As I mentioned, transcriptions that live in the online catalogs, they can be searched. Hopefully, with OCLC's help, someday full bibliographic and authority record metadata that can be easily imported into Wikisource. Wikisource actually has a whole author namespace for the authors of works, which would be a great place to actually become a place where you could find all these all the metadata that doesn't really fit on Wikipedia. Wikipedia's authority control integration will just have links to the authority files. And then I just have a lot of other ideas for more one-click options. Creating the index page is not really very fun, where that data already lives in other places, like online catalogs or even just the Commons page that's being transcribed. And we're working right now on better Wikisource to Wikipedia linkages, because right now a Wikisource page is just a transcription. So a lot fewer people will just go there just to read the text. The encyclopedic context is a lot more important to Wikisource. I guess I'm out of time, but thank you.
Thank you, Dominic. We have about 3 minutes in the official schedule, and I figure we can flow over for about 5 minutes. So if you have questions for both Sara and Dominic, this is a time I'm sure they'd be willing to meet with you in the future, too.
I'm Pete Forsyth, mostly of Wikipedia. I think I need to go away from this for feedback here. So I've worked on Wikisource a fair amount. I found it a really great platform, and it's been really fun the output of your project has been excellent. It's sort of developed a bit of sense of purpose around a project. My question is really, one of the things that I've continually been challenged with on Wikisource is that there are so many cool technical things that you can do, but it's a lack of documentation. It's like when you want to upload a PDF and have it do the OCR and create that index page and everything, that's one thing that I've been through it, people have walked me through it, but if I were to go back, I wouldn't be able to remember it. I would like to update the documentation page. It's something I've been meaning to do, but I have the feeling there are a lot of people in that position, and that's just one of so many useful little technical tricks that are sort of in the knowledge base of the people who are active with Wikisource. So my question is, what do you think is the best path toward having things documented to a point where it's easier for Wikipedians to become Wikisource people, or people who have experience with wikis to more easily become productive Wikisource contributors?
Yeah, I mean that's the kind of the number one. I don't know if this mic is working. That's kind of the number one comment that people have once they start working on Wikisource is the documentation is really rudimentary. And that's one of the reasons I kind of developed our own original text just to stick at the top, because there isn't a great single stop just to direct people. And a lot of that is because the community is still so small. It's been focusing a lot on just developing its own practices and working on the actual content, but it hasn't gotten to that stage yet. And so I feel like that's something where GLAM people who are spending their time on outreach, we can work on that. That's one of my goals, and I kind of mentioned here. There's that excellent Welcome to Wikipedia manual, which was originally developed for the education project, but now is being translated and used all over. We should have that for Wikisource, and I have the source file, and I've been that's a project that I have in mind, but it's not really, it shouldn't be that hard to rewrite the text, and then when we have an edit-a-thon, why don't we have a transcribe-a-thon, and we actually could have physical materials to give people and get them introduced to Wikisource.
We have about 5 minutes if we flow into the break, so a couple more questions.
Okay, just brief questions. In Polish Wikisource and Germans as well, as I know, the people are using quite extensively the online OCR system, which really speeds up the process, at least for printed materials. So then the people are not rewriting everything, but just making the OCR, which automatically is put on the Wikisource, and then there are two people proving the OCR, which really speeds up the process enormously. So will you be thinking about this, or you do everything manually, in fact?
Well, right now, I think the OCR system through Wikisource itself has been having some issues lately, and part of the problem is as a small project, Wikisource doesn't have a lot of MediaWiki developers devoted to it. But right now, our National Archives project, all we've been doing is using Wikisource just as anyone else on Wikisource would be. So we don't have any special, we haven't been doing OCR to prepare the documents beforehand. But that's certainly something that would speed up the process.
I just have sorry about the interruptions. Cell phone technology still stymies me. But I have a question about the Wikisource scope, really. You're talking about, you're with the archives, but I'm curious about, what about journal articles? And there seems to be a lot of overlap with the concepts of, open access repositories, and I'm wondering if Wikisource interacts with those.
So Wikisource's scope is essentially any published material or archival material that can be, archival material is acceptable because as long as it can be traced to a catalog record, or it exists, and same with any published material. So in theory, yes, journal articles. On the English Wikisource is a really vibrant project transcribing all the back issues of Popular Science Monthly, and the ones that are old enough to be in the public domain do not necessarily, even though you can get them, don't exist in text form. In theory, an open access journal could go on Wikisource, but if it's already accessible and searchable in plain text, that's not really the aim of the project, just to move things from one place on the web to the other.
Hi, I want to clarify, actually that was a great lead-in. The difference in scope between Commons and Wikisource. For new documents, if I find a patent from the 1800s that's only available if I email some patent office and they send me a scanned copy, am I better off uploading a PDF to Commons and then eventually transcribing it onto Source? Or does it get uploaded? I saw TIFF mentioned, which is not a format that I typically use for anything. So how would I go about introducing new documents into whatever workflow is most appropriate?
The way essentially all files for Wikisource are uploaded to Wikimedia Commons as the file repository for all of the Wikimedia projects. I've been trying to upload as many of the TIFF files from the National Archives as I can, because those are like the master files from the scans. But you can essentially use any file format, and so the way you would do it is upload to Wikimedia Commons and then transcribe on Wikisource.
So this will be the last question.
Thanks, I should say. I'm Matthew Battles from Harvard, and I want to ask Sara a question, but I think, Dominic, you may have feedback on it as well. I just wonder if you could be speculative about what the next steps are, kind of, on the institutional level and on the professional level for this relationship. Do we go beyond the Wikimedian-in-residence model to a more integrated acculturation of Wikimedia in libraries, archives, and museums? I mean, does it have a place in archival training and library and information science programs and that sort of thing?
That would be great. For us, I think having a real person show up and be able to talk to us, advocate internally was really important. When you're only interacting with Wikipedians online, it's hard to get a sense of what the project's about, but when you look in someone's eyes and see the burning passion, there's really something amazing, and that helps you to understand the project. And then, I think for us in GLAMs, Lori's talked about sort of empowering GLAMs to talk to other GLAMs, and really looking at holding internal edit-a-thons just for staff to help each other learn more about editing. And then going forward in the future, I'd love to see also greater development on Wikisource, especially not just documentation, but a usable interface so that we could start leveraging it for major transcription. We love sharing stuff on the encyclopedia, but in reality, we've got hundreds of thousands of documents that are maybe in longhand that have really valuable, interesting information. So as far as our internal workflow, we've got our catalogers who do the description with our catalog and on our website, adding this link or even doing a little bit of editing of the article as part of their normal workflow. Like, I'm going to put in the person's name, catalog, I'm going to describe the collection, now I'm going to go to that person's Wikipedia page, verify what's going on there, add a citation that footnotes this archival finding aid that the archivist has written. I'd love to see archivists get more engaged with the collections they're processing, editing the articles related to that person. So all of the above.
I think having a Wikipedian-in-residence is a great way to kickstart a project, and you get somebody that intimately knows Wikipedia within the institution, but at the same time it's kind of a crutch, because you shouldn't have one person in your institution that knows Wikipedia and that's the person. It should instead, your institution should be a member of that online community, which means whoever it is that's doing your other outreach, your other social media, Wikipedia should be part of their job, or part of an archivist processes a collection, and now has gained some knowledge about the subject. They can contribute it to Wikipedia as well as the link to the finding aid or whatever. And so that's also kind of as Sara was mentioning, a lot of the work that Lori Phillips has been doing to help cultural institutions help each other. I feel like I should mention the GLAM Wiki Consortium which is essentially the project, which is how we'll be doing that in the future. And the idea is we'll be having a shared community among both Wikipedians and professionals from cultural institutions. So once the people like Sara have gained Wikipedia knowledge, it shouldn't be that every time a cultural institution wants to start with Wikipedia, they have to find somebody from this limited pool of online volunteers. They should be able to go to their own community of colleagues to find that expertise also.
So thank you for an excellent panel. We've already infringed on your break, so I unfortunately I'm going to have to cut the question short. Thank you very much, and the next section is about 10 minutes.